How do you help people take hope into action?
You really have to, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, meet people where they are and also find out what their goals are. You know, my goal was to live a long, happy life and die of old age. That actually isn't everybody's goal. So the first thing I do with my clients is find out what they want. You know, they might want to figure out how to do the diet that's right for them, and they know that they shouldn't do red wine, but they just have a passion about red wine. And I'm like, you know, let's figure it out.
Welcome to Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear, where integrative oncology meets holistic healing. This podcast is your home for the latest in innovation, exploration, and elevation in all areas of integrative oncology, medicine, health, wellness, and beyond. Join me and a host of other innovators as we go from practicing to prescribing. Your daily dose of wellness begins now.
Dr. Nathan Goodyear here with another Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear podcast, From Soil to Cell to Soul. The cancer connection that comes from our environment through our gut microbiome to our very soul. But it's not just one that propagates disease. It's one that empowers us to actually transform the reverse and target soil health, food quality, the gut microbiome to actually go after cancer risk, empower patients in cancer prevention, empower cancer treatment, and maintain cancer recovery. I'm super excited about our guest today. I used to love to ski. That was before I got big and played college football and my knees got all messed up. So I'm super excited to hear the story, the backdrop from our guest today, because Alison Gannett, and if I mispronounce that, please correct me.
Oh, you could say Gannett.
Okay, Gannett.
Gannett, it's
there you
Gannett.
Go. There you go. There you go. She is going to provide a series of extremes, if you will. She's the founder of AntiCancer Personalized Nutrition, creator of AntiCancer 28-Day DIY Repair and Reset. She's very busy, as you can see. AntiCancer Personalized Nutrition Training, Allison's AntiCancer Cookbook, and then AlisonGannett.com. That's one L and two N's and two T's. She specializes in cancer prevention, management, and recovery. It's not just that she specializes it, she lives it. She uses highly personalized nutrition and lifestyle changes. Our connection here is through our good friend, Dr. Nasha Winters. Love that woman. She's a fantastic person. Former world champion extreme skier. I just like to get down the slopes. So it's not just focusing on extreme skiing. It's just like, I want to get down there in one piece. Grows and raises approximately, I love this, 90% of her own food. Was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of brain cancer, which we'll give in, where the average survival is about 6.8 months in 2013. And she brings deep knowledge, experience, compassion, and purpose, I think, for a mission of restoring health and hope. Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, we could really stop there because, and just say, okay, take it and run with it. But as I said in the kind of intro there, your life seems to be one of extremes. I mean, world champion extreme skier, cancer diagnosis, producing 90% of your own food supply. Some people couldn't even produce 1%. So can you kind of navigate that journey, if you will? Start by saying, what's an extreme skier? You get the picture in the background and,
here's me back here. Yeah. I'm one of those silly people you see on TV jumping off cliffs and competing in the X Games. We call them the X-ray games because we break a lot of bones in our bodies when we compete in those crazy things.
I've never heard that. That's great.
Yeah. And I never intended to be an extreme skier or free skier, whatever we call them. I'm a climate change scientist. And it's interesting because I grew up skiing, but I grew up in a very, my dad was an alcoholic. And so I think I had a lot of time of not being seen and heard in my family system. And so I think I turned to performance to try to gather attention now that I'm learning more and more about, the mental emotional component of cancer.
Yeah.
And I think I went from kind of a fat, dorky math geek. And then I was like, well, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And so I just step by step by step, all of a sudden I was competing nationally, then internationally, then winning, and then winning the world championships. And, I really thought I was a super healthy person. I exercised a lot. I ate well, at least I thought I ate well. And when I got diagnosed in, it was 2013, it was a tumor, kind of the size of a baseball, heading on its way to a grapefruit. And, it was a miracle that I didn't die, because the tumor was literally taking up most of my brain. So that had, I was rushed into emergency surgery. And, when I woke up, and then all of a sudden my whole life had changed. And I'm sure you've heard this story a million times. It was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was healthy. Now what? I clearly, what I heard to myself is that what I thought was healthy was not actually what was going on. And I was very lucky to meet Dr. Nasha Winters very soon after my diagnosis, 1 month after. And I did a 4-day retreat with her at that point. And, she was talking about cancer as a messenger and looking at the root causes of cancer and why I got cancer. And it just made so much sense to me as a scientist to look at, oh, here are my labs, and this is what I should eat because I'm looking at my labs. Yeah. Everybody's different. Or here's my personal DNA. And nutrigenomics is just one of my passions now. It makes sense. There should not be one size fits all diet for everybody out there. We have different genes, we have different labs, we have different health history. And so it makes sense these days that we can really use that information to create what I need and what you might need.
When by all standards, you would, at that moment when you were champion of extreme skiing, everybody would say, oh, that's the picture of health. That's the picture of triumph. That's the picture of victory. And so it would encompass all of that into one. And so I think it's always an opportunity to learn when people are in that point, because it's not just that you were quote unquote, living a healthy life. You were actively training to get the most out of your body physically and mentally, because people forget that it takes a lot of mental fortitude to get up on that mountain right there and say, yeah, let's go. So
totally.
it takes a lot of strength for that, not just the physical, the legs, the buttocks, and all that kind of stuff. But so that takes a lot of fortitude. And people go, how did that Allison become Allison with the tumor? But there seems to be a theme there, because the no fear approach and the dedication and the work to achieve that, because that takes extreme dedication. If I played college football, everybody knows that in those type of events, those types of professions, it's dedication, day and night. But you didn't stop that dedication at that point. It looks to me like you just pivoted, you refocused it into your healing. And obviously, and I've heard this from so many people, Allison, Nasha is one of those people that was a pivot point for you. But when people are diagnosed with cancer, I'd love to hear what your emotions were. What were your feelings? What were your thoughts? Because I don't think enough people talk about that, because it's mostly fear. Am I wrong there?
It was very much fear for me. And the Western medical system that I was in when I was diagnosed, one, withheld a lot of information from me about death and dying, about how terminal my prognosis was. They didn't fully inform me. And once I found out through, Dr. Internet, I figured out oh my gosh, I'm in a really serious situation here. And I felt very disempowered. It was like, okay, we're just going to do chemo, and we're going to do radiation, and we're going to do surgery, and then we're going to scan every 3 months. And, they didn't really say much more than that. And it just left me hanging, because I'm a kind of a brain that likes to put the puzzle together. And I really just craved more knowledge about my situation. And when I met Nasha, and she was like, oh yeah, people don't just get cancer. You didn't just get cancer. There's a reason you got cancer, and there's a reason you got sick. And I know you're doing, organic grass-fed beef, and you're raising your own food, but you might be eating the wrong things for your DNA and for your blood work. And then when she started to go into the science of it, because I don't think you have to be a scientist to understand this, but it just makes sense to me that there's a reason I got sick. And if there's a reason I got sick and we can identify most of those things, then there's a way to get well. And then I saw, instead of fear, then I saw an opportunity of like myself as a project to almost like prove the doctors wrong. And also, I just, I didn't feel like it was my time. And I felt like I wanted to learn from this. And I think it wasn't even until the last couple of years, I'm almost 13 years out now, where I'm really peeling back the layers of my mental, emotional state. Because the last 10 years, I've been working on diet. I've been working on nutrigenomics. I've been working on changing over what I grew and raised for food, looking at my autoimmune problems inside, looking at inflammation, looking at infections. Nasha has a saying, test and don't guess. Mm-hmm. And that just really resonated for me to figure out why I was in the position I was in. And that just gave me so much power. And it enabled that hope to go from we say fake it till you make it. I had a kind of a faking hope, and then it became real, especially after all the things that Nasha and I worked on. I could see, my labs being terrible in this area, and then we would implement a change. And then, wow, all of a sudden my neutrophils and lymphocytes were back to normal. And I was like, oh, this really works.
But you really did something that I think most people, as we were talking beforehand, they want to do. They don't know how to do. And the quote unquote medical system, from the conventional standpoint, because I come from that arena, I'm a conventional MD, but I'm also an MD homeopath. And the system doesn't allow them to do that. You went from one of hope, and you pivoted that to, one of fear, and you pivoted that to hope. And you went from passivity to action, because in the arena of cancer, people think, well, I'm just a passive player in why I developed cancer, and I'm just a passive player in trying to beat, quote unquote, the cancer. But then it also caused you to do something different, because it caused you to move from the periphery of this movement of integrative oncology, of healing, et cetera, to actually an active player. Mm-hmm. So it really changed you on multiple levels. And I'd love to hear you talk about, the fear to hope, but the passivity to action, because that, I believe, is what is critical to your success, but not just success in your journey with cancer, but the success of taking you from just an outsider to one that is actually changing lives within it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's my mission now with my business, is to help other people navigate that transition, because we aren't given the tools in our entire nation to really focus on health. We have a system, a healthcare system that is a maintaining sickness system. Yeah. And so, no, but I didn't really know this. I really had a lot of faith in the medical system in the beginning, like the standard of care. And then I realized it didn't matter what my test results say or said, or what I see with my clients is they're all funneling us into the same treatments, no matter what our tumor genetics are, what our human genetics are, what our lab tests say, what our DNA says that we can process or not process. And it just doesn't make sense. And it's, as you know, you've been in the standard of care Western medicine system, and you've been in, kind of the integrative system. You've seen many different systems, and you realize that the goals are different.
Yeah.
And when my doctor told me in 2013, he said, you have a great chance of success. Well, I thought success meant live a long, happy life and die of old age. So I was like, great, I have a great chance of success. And then I find out that, my life expectancy is, a matter of months, maybe years if I'm lucky. I realized that success for most doctors and what they teach is that success is to outlive your expiration date. So if my expiration date is 6.8 months and I live to 7.8 months, then they would consider me a success. And when I found that out, when Nasha told me that, I literally fell off my chair and I was like, this can't be true, right? And, it is in fact the case. And
I think that's part of and medicine has such a hard time with it because I think there's good underlying currents there,
yes.
Allison, that they're trying to help. But what they've done is they've pivoted from an individual, okay? A woman, a husband, a wife, a sister, a brother, a friend, and they pivoted to a number. And with that process, it's like, well, success is you just living, 6.9 months. And you're exactly right. Well, where's the success in that? That's average. Success is actually healing where you live decades. And success is what you are doing. Success is what you're living. And when patients want their doctor talking to them about outcomes, that's what patients are wanting. Something that embodies you, the lifestyle that you're living, the life that you're living, the goals that you're achieving, the goals that you're setting, the tomorrows that you're seeing, but yet doctors are just looking at numbers. And I think that detachment from, a profession that serves people, we're serving statistics and numbers and a system. So I think you hit that nail on the head, but you've really embodied something. I think we're at and this will probably tie into your scientific background. People look at Hippocrates and that great quote that's attributed to him, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. Allison, one of the things that I say is that we are getting that which we have sown. So we are reaping the harvest of the disease that we've been seeding. So instead of what Hippocrates said, I think he would be shocked that it seems what we've done is taken just the opposite. Let food be thy disease and disease be thy source from the food. I mean, it's what we're sowing. It's what we're sowing. And how does that tie into you? Because you really stepped into that hardcore. I mean, you just said, I'm growing my food. So,
well, it was interesting. The story was, I was working with Al Gore and his team on climate science.
Okay.
And I had an epiphany when a bunch of us were at his house and he was not walking the talk at all. And it made me very upset at that time. And I vowed from that moment on, as a climate change person working towards solutions, that I had to be the solution. And so that's when I decided I cannot live at a ski area at 9,000 feet and party my life away. I need to move to a place where I can grow and raise my own food. And, being outside and being in nature is my resource and my joy. And I think it's very important to have joy. But I was a human doing. not a human being. And that is the biggest shift for me with cancer and the biggest gift that cancer has given me. And so I looked at what we were growing. And at that time, it appeared that we were growing our own food and, I was making everything from scratch and it was great. But why was I with terminal cancer? If that was working, I wouldn't have terminal cancer.
Right.
So we first looked at the labs and of course, all the markers for fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, fasting glucose, uric acid, all of those things were high because I was we have 200 fruit trees. So of course I was eating a lot of fruit. I was also raising a lot of grains and eating those. And I was vegetarian for probably 16 or 17 years. And the most fascinating part is once we got into Nutrigenomics, which would have been 2014, I ran my human DNA and it came back that I have TCF7L2, which means I have a genetic inability to process grains and beans. And then I ran my husband's DNA and he's a cattle rancher, full beef, eats beef like 4 times a day. He has an HFE gene, which means he has an inability to process red meat and to purge iron from his body. So he has what we call genetic hemochromatosis. So Here he was eating meat 4 times a day. Here I was being a vegetarian and our genes said we literally had to switch diets. And so we were both eating well. We just weren't eating the right thing for our DNA. And, I was resistant at first, but then as I saw my labs, and this is really fascinating about what I've learned from Nasha is not only are we looking at nutrigenomics of what we should eat with our human DNA, we want to see the expression of those genomics in our labs. So for example, you might have a gene like HFE, which might say you would have genetic hemochromatosis. Then you have to go over to your labs and see if your ferritin is elevated. And that would be the epigenetics are those genes turned on or turned off like a light switch. And so when we figured that out, we just were able to still use the land that we're using and grow our food without chemicals. And, we make our own compost but we just switched to match what we were meant to eat. And, I thought I felt good, in my 30s, but now that I'm 60, I feel way better, So I think we, as, kind of modern day, we don't know how good we could feel. And that is something that cancer has really taught me.
So obviously cancer changed you and it changed you for the better. It actually empowered you through the rest of your life. But what you're describing there is, and I think you did it very eloquently, Allison, was you put your body in the best position here, going back to your skiing days, to perform.
Yep.
You basically said, okay, what is my body's, preferred environment, preferred food source, preferred function, and said, okay, let me match that. Of course, you can't do that in the one size fits all approach at all. But I really want to, because people go, okay, this is a great story. I love it. It gives me hope. But what I want patients to take action steps. And I think a lot of people would sit here, Allison, and say, but how do I do what you did? Meaning, how do I grow my own food? Because I'm a huge regenerative farmer fan. Oh, absolutely. I'm a geek. I say that, look, we need to restore the patient-doctor relationship. Notice patients first. But I think what we really need to do is go back to a patient-farmer-doctor relationship. Because if a patient is hand in hand with a farmer, which you're one and the same, right? Your patient and farmer are really in the same body. There's less need for a doctor. But then if disease develops, that patient farmer is already working hand in hand. Now the doctor comes on board. It becomes now a better relationship with better outcomes. So the naysayer that would say not everybody can do what you did, how would you say they can do maybe 25% of what you did, 100% of what you did? How do you help people take hope into action?
You really have to, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, meet people where they are and also find out what their goals are. You know, my goal was to live a long, happy life and die of old age. That actually isn't everybody's goal. So the first thing I do with my clients is find out what they want. You know, they might want to figure out how to do the diet that's right for them. And they know that they shouldn't do red wine, but they just have a passion about red wine. And I'm like, you know, let's figure it out. I have to say, people look at me and they say, oh my gosh, she's like doing it all. She's doing so much that I can't even start because it's overwhelming. And in the beginning, I was not a good cook. I did not learn how to cook in my family. So I literally had to learn how to cook, and I had to learn how to reach out. One of my favorite tips and tricks is to hire a local teenager or somebody in your community that needs a job to cook for you once a week.
Oh, wow.
And they can make staples for you. Like I have a seed bread recipe that I really love. Frittata is a really good staple. Chimichurri sauce is a really good staple. Having good salad dressings. You don't have to grow your own food to eat well. And you don't have to even know how to cook. You can lean on friends and family that can help you do that. And really taking baby steps. Instead of saying, okay, I realize my blood sugar is really high. My, fasting insulin is 11 and I need to get it below 3. That just seems daunting. I have a client, our mission for several months was to just work on his addiction to bananas. And so, bananas, can have like twice as much sugar or carbohydrates than even a Snickers bar. And people, I was a perfect example of that. I would have like a banana, oatmeal, and low-fat milk for breakfast because I thought that was healthy. And I had no idea that I was eating like a bucket full of carbohydrates at that time. So small baby steps, like pick one thing that you can change. Maybe instead of having bananas, you're going to choose a healthy snack for the next week or two that is something other than a banana that has a lower glycemic index. And once you kind of build up that kind of muscle memory of success, you know it from football, right?
Yep.
If you know all of a sudden you master a move, like maybe it's not with some defender on top of you, but your body starts to remember that movement and that success. And once you start building that, like, oh, I was able to pick one thing and I was able to conquer that one thing. And then you're like, okay, let's try something else. And, way back when I got diagnosed, it seems like forever ago in 2013, we didn't have coaches and consultants and people to lean on. And now people have, like myself and my team, and can just go to AlisonGannett.com, sign up for coaching. And we're going to teach you the things that the doctors don't teach you. We're going to teach you how to look at your own labs and really know, hopefully by the time you've worked with us for several months, that all of a sudden you're going to know your own labs better than the doctor does. And that is empowerment. And you're building that muscle memory of, look, I didn't believe it, that I could eat more fat and the right fats for my DNA and actually maintain a healthy weight. Because I was overweight as a child. And so I've always had this like, we grew up in that low fat scarcity thing where you starve yourself and eat no fat. And I really believe that launched me along with, I was not a good vegetarian. I didn't eat vegetables when I was a vegetarian. I was a carbaholic, full on carbaholic. And as a professional athlete, I ate goos and gels and bars.
Yeah.
holy moly. I mean, now when I look back at my supposedly healthy diet, I kind of, I just didn't know. And we don't know until we know.
Right.
And
Right. Which is why your platform, I think, is so important, Allison, because, this may, I think you've already made the statement, but this may shock somebody listening or watching. Some of the most unhealthy diets I've seen are actually vegetarians because they're so processed. And it's that processed and ultra processed strategy, whether it's vegetarian, whether it's not, that I think is really seeding the disease that we're now seeing reaped throughout really the world, but particularly in Western countries. And so, it's really interesting when you look at the corollaries. In 1800, it's estimated that 6% of the population lived urban, 94% rural. In 1900, that had shifted to 40% urban and 60% rural. And in 2024, 82% urban and 18% rural. And through that same time frame, we've had a shift from that just kind of traditional regenerative farming to the industrialized farming, which now we're going to step into a place that I think you're going to really love. But all of the toxicants that have been a byproduct of that into the environment. I mean, just take glyphosate for one. What we've been doing is we've been seeding the change that has led to the disease that we're seeing. We've been transforming our soil, our food, our gut microbiome, and all of that is compromising our immune system. That's why we're seeing not only the cancer changing, because I tell patients, cancer today is different from yesterday. It's not the same disease your mom, dad, or your grandparents dealt with. But there's an opportunity, because if that seeding happened from our environment, then if we change our environment, which you kind of alluded to, we can reseed and retransform, and I say reprogram all of that to allow the body to do what it's designed to do, which is heal. And that's what you're doing on a daily basis. I mean, what's your thought process on all of that? Because I look at soil and I look at the gut microbiome, and they're really kind of one and the same.
Oh, hold on. I've got an alarm going off.
Oh, yeah. It's food.
It's to tell me to take my vitamins.
Oh, there you go.
The right vitamins for my DNA and for my blood work.
So if soil is the nutrient supply and the lifeblood for plants, then our gut microbiome is the same for us.
Totally the same. And when you say soil, to the gut and then to the soul, I mean, when I look at a kale plant out in my garden, and I see there's several kale plants, and one is particularly covered in aphids, for example. We see that a lot. What I could do is spray those aphids, like with some kind of chemical to get rid of them, which is what, even organic industrial agriculture does. There's certain sprays that are allowed. But instead of doing that, and I kind of think of that as that's I'm not against chemo at all, but that would be like giving that kale chemo. But instead of giving that kale chemo, if I just give it a lot of compost and sun and love and water, all of a sudden those aphids leave that kale plant because it's no longer a sick kale plant, and they go to another plant that is compromised. So I kind of think of that as a lot of like my body, and I can give my body, clean filtered water. I can give it unsprayed produce. I can give it, you mentioned people that are vegetarians that are sick. I also see carnivores that are very sick because they are not sourcing clean meats. And most meat, we raise cattle, most meats are injected with a growth hormone so that they produce more meat faster, because they want to have the cow born in January and slaughtered in the next fall so that they don't have to overwinter the cow. we raise our cows for 3 years, which is very expensive to do, but we're feeding them just grass and, spring-fed water. But it takes more effort to do that.
Interesting story. I used to have a farm in Louisiana. And I didn't have time to manage the fence line. And so I had a local farmer. He said, hey, can I, basically rent out your pasture land and pay that by taking care of your fence line? I was like, absolutely, because I don't want to do that. So every Saturday morning, he'd come out to check on the cows. And I'd usually go out there and check on them and say, hey, how's everything doing? And he would always let me know when the new calves were coming in. But one day I went out there and I said, hey, where are the new calves? I haven't seen them. He said, no, they're right there. I was like, they're full grown. I said, what happened? So he started to tell me, injection with antibiotics, hormones. Well, all of that, the injection of the antibiotics is shifting the gut microbiome into a pattern of bacteria that increase nutrient extraction. So these animals are not only just eating grains and et cetera, but they're going to extract more calories, nutrients from them, and that gets stored into the heavier weight. The hormones just accelerate that process. But all of that compromises the immune system of that animal. But the animal never sees, right, the end result of that because, quote unquote, they're harvested before. What we are seeing is a byproduct of that in us. We're not being harvested. Well, we kind of are, but we're being harvested for the medical system. But that process is bearing out in us. Mm-hmm. And what I love about your story and what you do with your website, and we'll talk about that in just a second, is you're basically working to reset the gut microbiome. You're working to transform that into one that doesn't just fuel, weight, inflammation, immune dysfunction, disease propagation, but one that actually, what I believe is what it means to be a physician, which is to heal. Mm-hmm. And so, but would you see yourself as a farmer? I mean, how would you, if you had to step back and say, who and what is Allison today? How would you describe that in 3 words, individual words or a phrase?
That is a really tough question. I would say that I used to call myself like more of a fighter. Okay. And I would say now I'm kind of trying to live more in sync with nature. Okay. And 1, it's because I love being in nature, but 2, I found that, most people that are having health problems, don't have a good sleep system. They either exercise too much or they don't exercise enough. It's kind of like we're not living like our ancestors used to live. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, what is this crazy way of eating that you are on? And like, how can you maintain that? And doesn't it taste awful? I'm like, first of all, it has to be delicious. But second of all, it is the way our ancestors ate. They ate as much fat as possible because fat was nourishment. And if you eat a lot of fat and you get away from carbs and sugar, you burn fat all the time. And I can actually eat twice as much now than I could 10 years ago because my whole system of creating ATP is now on, a burning fat versus burning sugar. And ultimately, I think what you talked about, the gut microbiome, I think that is one of the kind of future of medicine for sure and health. And I think the other thing, the elephant in the living room, is mitochondrial damage. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are like, oh, what is mitochondria? I always think of like 8th grade, high school biology. We draw a circle for a cell. We put a circle in the middle for the nucleus. And then in my 8th grade, we drew little wavy lines. And the little wavy lines, which never made sense to me then, now I've done a lot of research, and it's all about every single type of cancer and most modern day diseases all can be traced back to broken or damaged mitochondria or absent mitochondria. And so a lot of people think of cancer as a multitude of different diseases, but ultimately it's one thing. And I don't think I've ever seen a healthy microbiome from a person that is not well. And actually we do a lot of prevention, and we actually don't see healthy microbiomes at all. I grow and raise almost all my own food. And when I did my toxin panel, I was off the charts for toxins.
Yeah.
And I grow and raise my own food. I filter my own water. I travel with all my own food. So the only way I could be getting exposed to these chemicals is through the air that I breathe. And I live in a very rural area with relatively clean air. So we do live in kind of this toxic soup. And you mentioned that I think we're seeing forms of cancer and types of cancer and ages of cancer. It's all new. Like we're calling them turbo cancers these days. We're seeing like cancers that we only saw in like older white men, suddenly appearing in, 7-year-old or an 11-year-old, So we are in a new age of where we have, we haven't taken care of ourselves. We haven't lived in harmony with the planet. We haven't taken care of that kale plant out there. I would, play all day and then work all night. And that was horrible for my sleep cycles, and so, now, and I say like, okay, if you go to bed at 1 a.m., you're not all of a sudden going to go to bed at 9, but you're going to try to take small incremental changes because you need to slowly rewire your system.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, clearly advocate has been a strong suit of you through the decades, but I think you pivoted because of the cancer diagnosis to one that really is promoting healing. And it's through one of changing one's environment, and that's through farming, that's through lifestyle. So, I mean, advocate, healer, farmer, these are powerful words that I would tag to you. And I think it gives patients hope. It gives patients opportunity. So because you've really kind of set up a kind of a network, if you will, how can patients learn from you? How can patients reach out to you? What resources do you have available to help patients wherever they may come in to this arena, whether it's prevention, whether it's treatment, whether it's remission? What network opportunities do you have for them?
Obviously everybody can go to my website, AlisonGannett.com, AlisonGannett.com. And, you don't have to do all these things that I'm doing. When I started doing this, I was living in a town, and I was growing 1 box of herbs in my mudroom. And that's how I started. So don't think that a lot of my clients come to me and they're like, I want to be a farmer. And I was like, I actually would not recommend that right now because farming is very stressful. My biggest passion really is teaching people how to cook now, because what I found when I was put on a low carb, high fat diet was that the recipes out there were really not low enough carb for cancer, and they weren't high enough fat for cancer. And so I had to adapt a lot and create a lot of recipes because I knew that this wasn't going to be sustainable if I didn't like the food that I was eating. So I immediately started with brownies because I had to have brownies. And so I developed a brownie recipe that was had no grains at all and just good fats. And I love those brownies, and it just started from there. And then eventually in 2021, I published an e-cookbook. So if people are struggling, the easiest thing they can do, and if you use I have a coupon code for today called Cook50. And if you use that, you can get the cookbook for half off. So
And we'll put that definitely in the show notes so everybody
Yeah,
will know. And by the way, when we cut this up, we'll send all the information, all the reels, everything, the raw content to you, so you can use it however
perfect.
you want to use it.
Right.
So that's fantastic. So you're not just telling your story, you're actually enabling patients, again, wherever they are in that cancer journey, to tell their own story. And I think that's pretty neat. I think that's
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
neat.
not, when people come to myself and my team for consulting or coaching, it's said, really, it's more about guiding, of walking this walk together and finding out what's important for that person and making those changes together and supporting each other, because this can be a very lonely journey. And by having an advocate like myself or my team, and we meet with you, we have programs that are just like, you can meet with us one and done, look at your labs. We can create, what a good diet would look for you based on your labs. And then if you like what that looks like, then we can add the DNA to that. So what we do is month by month, add another layer of testing, so that each month we're kind of seeing where you're at and what's working and what's not working. And we're adding more testing. So a lot of people come to us to prevent cancer because maybe they have a lot of cancer in their family, or a good friend of theirs got sick and they thought they were healthy and they weren't. And, so there's that whole opportunity of, I feel like we should all be running our labs at least once a year and having someone like yourself or me look at them and be like, hey, is there anything that is we're looking for, like, kind of simmering embers, right?
Yep.
Whereas I love my GP, but he is looking for something that is like the house is on fire.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'm looking to have my liver enzymes at 20. He probably wouldn't send me an alert until they were over 100.
Yeah.
And, that liver enzymes being high is a really good way to be like, hey, there's something toxic in your environment that we need to look at. And, figure out, is it your water? Is it your food? Is it your air? Is it your body products? Is it your cleaning products? Is it that sofa that you just bought at Home Depot? Is it radon? We just go through the list, and by basically, we leave no stone unturned to look for potential root causes.
Yeah.
No amount of treatment, even if you have the best treatment in the world. For example, if your water contains radium, or uranium, which is naturally occurring in a lot of water in the United States and abroad, we work with people all over the world. If you're drinking radioactive water, you might never get rid of your cancer, right? So one of the first things we do is we now, because of the internet, we can look up anybody's water tests. And it's extremely helpful. I had no idea that our water in our area was radioactive, naturally occurring from the radium and uranium in the ground. And also my house was full of radon. So how could I heal if I wasn't taking these two things that were damaging my body, damaging my mitochondria, damaging my gut biome? Health was not possible until those toxins were removed.
Yeah. So they can find that all that on your website. Are you on social media at all, Allison?
I was very heavily, and then I decided for my own peace of mind and my tendency to overwork to, I just have a private Facebook page for those people who are working with myself or my team.
Okay.
That is really helpful because I believe that we support each other in community, and to not feel alone is really important. I do have Allison's AntiCancer pages and a few social, but really I've just decided to preserve my peace of mind.
Sanity. Yeah, I get it. So basically, AllisonGannett.com. Again, ALISONGANNETT, which that will be in the show notes. So definitely check that out there. Allison, thank you so much. First of all, your inspirational story. You're one from fear to hope, one from passivity to action, one from periphery to really empowering through your move to the center to actually make change and empower others to make change. So thank you for telling your story, sharing what your work is, and basically your new life purpose, and that's to heal others through the healing that you've empowered in yourself. So thank you again for telling that story.
Well, thank you for telling the same story to a lot of people. And I love talking with you. This is super fun. And one day I'm going to have shirts as nice as you.
Yeah. So one more quick question.
Yeah.
Do you still do extreme skiing?
You know, I do my sports for joy now.
Okay.
None of my sports are for competition. It's for pure, just love of being outside.
And you still ski though?
Oh yeah. I love to ski. I love to bike. And you know, part of it when I was healing, you know, I couldn't do like any exercise for like the first 5 years. And so I had to find other things to fill my time up with fun.
Yeah.
And that was actually lovely too. But it is a transition to a lot of people get kind of, and I think this is really important. Nasha said this to me way back when. Normal gave us cancer. And so immediately when I got sick, I wanted to go back to before I was sick. And I wanted to go back to what I thought was normal. And I wanted to have like, you know, the same foods, and I wanted the same exercise routine, and I wanted the same, you know, I kind of was an overworker and a type A personality, and I wanted to like keep all that. And then Nasha was like, Allison, normal gave you cancer. Why do you want to go back? And so she helped me develop more of like, what is a new normal that is going to be both beautiful and healthy.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say that that process is easy, but I want everybody to realize that it's important to have that step.
And the process is ongoing, as I think you probably agree.
Forever and ever.
That's right. Well, Allison, thanks again. This is the Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear podcast with an inspiring story of, again, activity to empower yourself to heal, not just for 6.8 months, but for many, many decades to come. What it shows you is that it's real and it's possible and it's tangible. We need your help. I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and share this with those others out there that are maybe working in prevention, dealing with that 6.8 months diagnosis, or they're in remission and they want to go, how do I extend that remission to a decades and lifetime of health and wellness? Share this with those individuals. And of course, we encourage you to promote all of the social media websites. You can find everything related to Alison Gannett and her work in our show notes. Thanks again for joining us on this Prescribed by Dr. Nathan Goodyear podcast.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Prescribed Podcast. All references supporting this episode can be found on the prescribed.com website. That's pre-scribe.com. To get your next dose of medical innovation, make sure you subscribe to Prescribe. We'll see you for your next refill.